if you go back to episode 1, the way he's standing, the way we reveal Sam at the end, looking out at the pond, shooting him from behind, we did that with Elliot. And he actually ended up saying the exact same word to
Yeah, he
Kat as Sam does to Del on the phone. I think that in and of itself should tell people something about Sam.
Congratulations on
Thank
season
you.
4. This 3rd season is crazy. I'm so excited to dive into it with you guys again. I loved talking with you for the last season about all the things we could expect, and I mean, you guys took it to another level.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yay, that's
It's
great.
so lovely to see you.
Of
Yeah,
course.
it is. This is a tradition.
I know.
This finale, I mean, it was so intense. There was so many layers and emotions, and I would love to start with what it was like filming those scenes with Alice that were sort of outside the usual timeline, especially with Colton. You know, those oh, they gave me chills.
Anytime anyone asks me about it, I don't even know if I can get through the answer without crying myself still, because it was just so, from writing it to then hearing everyone reading it in the cast read through of 10 to then being on set the day that they shot it, everyone was so committed to getting it right, and getting that moment of Colton recognizing Alice for who she really is as his granddaughter, but then also explaining what he thought and when and why and the secrets that he carries. It was a really tough thing to write and witness, but also just so cathartic and so needed. It was, it's the culmination of 3 seasons of questions swirling around this man, and it was lovely to be able to finally give them their moment together, and hear what Colton has to say. I mean, the beauty of 9 and 10 was that we got to hear 70s Colton explain some things in episode 9, and then to hear adult Colton, who we've known since episode 1 and been so, in love with ever since, acknowledging and explaining, is such a satisfying moment to have. And we wanted to get it right for everyone, for ourselves. And I truly do think Jefferson and Sadie gave the best performances of their time on our show. We're just so proud of them. And it was it was an intense day. It was also a pond day, so those days are always super hyper scheduled because it's a lot of pieces in play. But we knew enough to know that we wanted to give those scenes their time, so we essentially devoted one pond day to just those scenes because we needed to get it right.
Were you guys always planning to sort of make Colton as out of the loop as the rest of the characters when it comes to time travel? Because, I think we're all thinking he must know everything, and he also doesn't really know.
I think it's always been, in the back of our minds, a pretty fine line with Colton because of the fact that his own son goes missing, and he does spend all the money trying to find him, and it does disintegrate his marriage and his relationship with his daughter, that he couldn't know everything, because if he did, he'd look awful. I mean, he's not an awful person. And at the same rate, it was that reminder to our audience that everyone has their own experience with this pond, and because they keep it to themselves and don't share it, there's not a lot of communication between generations, between people, about what you learn from this pond. And so I think Colton says it himself. I made a terrible mistake, and I think everyone on the show is culpable of making a terrible mistake when it comes to the pond, which is not talking about it, with each other. Communication is so key when it comes to this stuff. And if
Yeah.
we've learned it, we've seen this family learn how to communicate with one another about life and tragedy and trauma over the course of the 3 seasons. I'm hoping that communication continues on in a season 4 to embrace the lore. And But no, I think it was a really lovely moment, because I think what we did do is show that he's also human. He's like, I think Colton is someone that we've put on a pedestal a little bit, has become this mythic person because he is a perfect dad and he is a perfect husband and he is a perfect, now we've seen him in the 70s, and just his love for Dell is so pure, and none of that is wrong, like none of that is incorrect, but he's also a human and makes mistakes just like Kat who makes a lot of mistakes. And I think it was important to see that.
I think that's such a great point too of like the communication is key. I've told you guys, me and my dad watched this show together, and that's something my dad always has said to me. And I feel like that's when you're watching the show, you're just seeing like yourself in it and your own family in it, and I feel like that's why people are able to resonate with this so much. Because even though it's about time travel, which is otherworldly, there are these things that are just like universal, that we can all connect to, and the way that you see the ripples of how things repeat throughout all the different timelines, it's like it's just so cool and so like relatable. So I love that.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad to hear that. That's the goal for sure for us,
Yeah.
is to kind of bridge this gap between the impossible, the time travel, and the absolutely authentic and real, which is a broken family, trying to heal. And it's lovely to hear when it does feel real. That's great.
I'd love to hear, why Colton and Jacob were able to recognize Alice over time, whereas certain characters like Dell maybe couldn't, even though they all kind of had the same time with her.
I think it's all about when they meet her. Um, the thing about Dell is, if you actually look at the time Alice spent with her in the 90s over the course of season one, it's really not that much. I think they shared 3 dinners together, maybe. Like there's the boat,
Yeah.
there's the first dinner, and I think there was one other time. But a lot of that time was Dell dealing with a missing child.
Mm.
And I think before that fall carnival, she'd really only met Alice a couple of times. And then the fall carnival happened and her world imploded. And so anyone coming and going from that house was just not what she was thinking about. And whereas I think Colton met Alice in the 70s in such a clear time of falling in love, it was a happy time. It was an informative time for him, singing his songs and getting noticed by, a music producer, and she was involved in that. Like it was a very pointed, happy moment, which would include her, versus Dell's very distracted, traumatized moment. And as for
So
Jacob, I think Jacob is a bit of a mercurial character in and of himself. And we've always joked about the reason that he remembered Alice from that dinner was like literally a month later he was gone. And maybe he did see something in her that, Jacob has always been a little all-knowing in his weird little way, and we always like to kind of keep that open-ended with him. What do you think, Mom?
I think that we knew that Colton knew something about Kat even in season one in the truck.
Oh
And
yeah.
I just to go back and to trace how he knows, like he knew something in that truck and he played it so beautifully that it was very nebulous. And I think with Dell, she's the one who's keeping this household going, and she's running around, she's making lunch, she's making dinner, she's got all these kids coming and going. Even in the 70s, she was removed. She was the girl on the lounge by the pool who wasn't really part of Evelyn and Alice's friendship. And so she's always once removed. And I think that makes it extremely believable that she's just, totally not into the intrigue of it, like Colton was a little bit. Jacob, as Alex says, is one of those kids who you never know what's really going on behind his eyes. and I totally believe he still knows things that, as an adult, that he just keeps in there and doesn't really express them.
I wanted to clarify because I know this season they mentioned that Dell had a secret that could change Alice's perception of her. I was wondering if that is the fact that Colton kind of gave up music for her, so to speak, or if there's another secret that we may learn in season 4.
I think it's both. I mean, first, absolutely. I think we saw Dell this season really struggle as Alice comes home with all these reports of the 70s and how she saw it from her perspective and from Evelyn's perspective. It reminded Dell of a time where, yes, she was happy and in love, but she also felt like maybe she forced herself into Colton's life at the end, and made him give up something he really wanted to do in order to accommodate her and her needs. And I think as Alice's journey into the 70s got deeper and deeper, that part of the memory was more and more present in Dell's mind, because she knew Alice was going to get to that moment. And I think, yeah, I think she had a big, especially as she's also learning that Colton's been keeping all this crazy stuff from her, the time travel, and, she's doubting their relationship, and she's trying to grapple with, well, why would he have kept this stuff from me? Why would he keep secrets? And in her brain, tying that to, well, it's because I made him do this. And it's because he must have resented me for that thing that I've always been worried I really messed up in his life. Now this is confirmation that all of those fears and insecurities I had were true, because he kept this from me. And so I think initially it is about that. It is about the idea that she came back. He was on the cusp of potential greatness with his music and his deep love for music, and instead he said, no, we're staying, and I'm with you. But over the course of episode 10, what we realize is that dream of music wasn't really the dream. It was a means to the end, and the dream was actually Dell. And music was a way to get there, because he thought making the money, being kind of, if you got to star status, then her parents would actually take him seriously. And so playing that demo tape for Dell in the scene just ahead of them all jumping is really a release for Dell from the pain and the worry of that. But look, that's not to say there aren't other fun
things.
secrets that
Yeah.
Dell is hiding from her daughter and granddaughter, and that's well, stay tuned.
We got to talk about Dell's first jump, time traveling. That was so unexpected. I was not ready for it. What was that like on set? And what was the decision behind, being like, all right, she's going to time travel now?
It's funny that we asked her at one point.
Yeah.
We were in Los Angeles for some sort of interview type thing, and she was there, of course. And we had a glass of wine with her on a rooftop bar, and we kind of, Marley and Alex and I looked at each other and we went, maybe now. And so I just said, what would you feel? How would you feel about jumping in the pond? And I won't say, she basically said, hell yeah. It was that kind of reaction. It was like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
And we thought, okay, you
Mhm.
heard it here,
That
folks.
was well before we'd broken season 3.
Yep.
It was just as we were starting the room for the season, and I think it really informed how we approached it, because you want that first Dell jump to be as epic as possible, and so saving it till the end was kind of perfect for us, and it was so great that Andy was game. And the day of was actually very funny, because in your brains you're writing it and you're saying, oh, and then they grab hands and they jump, but the logistics of those rocks, we weren't even sure if we could fit 3 of them on the rock. So we were, that was a consideration. Luckily it worked. Luckily they're awesome.
And it was such an iconic shot.
I'll never forget the first take of that wide and coming in on the zoom as they all hold hands, and watching that camera skate across the pond and seeing Andy and Kyler and Sadie all hold hands. It was like, oh my God, we did it. We're doing it. It's crazy. The thing that we always talked about.
And especially in the mix with adding the song, the original Colton Love song.
Yeah.
And blasting that out was so moving for all of us. We were all in tears in the mix.
It happens a lot on our show.
It happens a ton.
Or just with us, maybe, I don't know.
It's awesome because, this pond has taken so much from people, but to see Dell like have a positive experience and maybe be like, wait, this opens up, like, I don't know, you could go anywhere, you could see anyone, maybe even reunite with people.
And we had to earn that, right? Like, this was the season to really earn that change of heart. Is, we see her even as late as episode 8 yelling at this pond saying, you won't stop until you take everyone I love, and I'm the only one that's left behind. And we really needed to see Dell through this season have a reckoning with the pond now that she knows the truth, and then come to accept it. And then, yes, of course, that first jump had to be a way to show her that it can be a gift versus a curse. The curse stuff comes later. But like that first, and it's something that Alice said to Elliot before she took him in the pond, which was, you know, he was very reticent to go, and she says, it's not the first time is a gift. I promise you, the first time is a gift. And sure enough, for Elliot, it was 5 more minutes with Colton. And so we were very determined to make that jump worthwhile for her. And in the end, I think that jump and going back and seeing the wedding was the culmination of her arc for the season, which was feeling like her memories weren't her own anymore and doubting the love that she and Colton, she thought they had, and the love story that they had. And then to go back and see that wedding and say the words of, it's exactly how I remembered it, was just this beautiful affirmation that her memories are her own. That horrible fight that she has with Alice in episode 5, where she screams at her to stay out of my memories, and it was all coming and working towards this point where she had to see for herself that actually she should never doubt the love that she and Colton had. It is exactly how she remembered it. It was as pure and iconic as we all know it to be.
Speaking of the pond jumping, Jordan Dow shared with us the Pond Plunger Awards.
Yes. I have. It's waiting. I haven't seen them.
Yeah, I'm glad he shared that. That's
I have
great.
one for Jefferson that I have to give to him. But yeah, those are homemade. And,
Made them.
but yeah, they're really fun to give out at the wrap parties. It's a very unique club. And Jordan, oh my gosh, he was so incredible. I think he gave us one of the most iconic jumps of the whole show in that last and in the end of episode 8. It was great. And it got the camera. Did you notice that? The splashes hit the camera. We were like, well, it is what it is.
Something else I wanted to ask about with pond jumping was, or I guess pond pushing. It was so cool seeing Alice kind of run into herself. This is something I've been curious about. Like, would she ever see herself? Because we've already seen Kat see a younger version of herself, but to see Alice see a version of herself from just a few months before, what was that like filming that moment of Alice pushing herself into the pond?
Complicated.
Very complicated.
Brain breaking.
Complicated.
I think the actual shooting of it was really, really fun. It was the coming up with it that was the brain breaking moment, because we were sitting in this writer's room going, what's a cool way for someone to go in the pond that we haven't seen yet? And we all sort of said, well, what if you get pushed? Like you don't mean to go. And then through that, we were like, well, who would push Alice? Who would do that? And we realized that the only person who would ever do that to Alice is Alice. And so we were trying to figure out a way to make it work. And oh my gosh, there were so many whiteboards and arrows pointing to, whatever. But we got it down, we figured it out. And I hope people love the payoff, because it's an awesome moment. Yeah. And I think Sadie did such a great job. The part about that I really have loved from, just standing back and watching the audience's reactions and looking on the fan pages and whatever, is so many people screenshot that shot of the person running through the field back to the pond from episode 1. And it is actually Sadie. Like that is Sadie. We were not lying. Like we didn't manipulate anything. It's Sadie. Her hair is tucked into her jacket. And I love that everyone, like it really, we were all so worried that people would just get it in the first episode by freeze framing that, but they didn't, which is great.
The Casey reveal, we know that they're a time traveler. What can you tell us about Casey in general? I feel like there's a lot of places we could go with this character.
I think that's what's so fun about the Casey character is I love that it's keeping people guessing. They're the biggest anomaly of this show, and I think that's so great. What can we tell you about Casey? Casey is probably, now that it's out that they're a time traveler, I think it's very safe to say that they know a heck of a lot more than maybe even a good chunk of our characters do about the lore, about the story, about everything. And I think that they are fascinating, and they will continue to be fascinating. And it's so perfectly played by Vaughn. They're a little bit of magic, and I love that. I love that they can pop up unexpectedly anywhere. I love that they are very similar to Fern in a weird way about like they kind of do speak in riddles a little bit, or
Mhm.
they only share as much as is absolutely necessary to share. Um, they're well versed clearly in the rules of the pond.
Oh, yes. And speaking of Fern, Grandma Fern mentions that she and Kat have met before. She's got all these riddles. It was stuff about 25, 65. Do you think that this could be hinting that maybe we'll head into the 20s in season 4?
I think anything is possible. I think,
Yeah,
the
anything's
Fern of it
possible.
all isn't over. That's what I can say for sure.
I mean, yes, she's a little nuts, but anything she says, you need to listen to.
We're so happy that people have taken to Fern the way we
Yeah,
did.
it's great.
Just, she's awesome, and Jill Frappier, who plays her, is such a great actor.
There's so many things around Elliot at the end of this season that just I'm imagining we're going to learn a lot more about him and his history in season 4. So, what can you tell us about this reveal as the baby that we've been trying to figure out?
All
Um,
will be revealed.
all will be revealed for sure. I think what's really interesting about how we leave things in this season is it seems like maybe from here on out things are about to get a lot more personal for Elliot when it comes to the pond. He's someone that's other than this lovely jump that Alice gave him to get his 5 more minutes with Colton, he's kept the pond at arm's length, right? He's the guy that observes and comes up with the rules and figured out the fin factor and all those things. But he's also kind of, held it against characters as well, like Kat running off to the past in order to avoid problems in the present. He's certainly called that out, and he has absolutely recognized the trouble that you can get in by going back and maybe attempting to fix something, and obviously you can't. And all through that he's kind of taken this sort of objective view from afar, from high up. And what's interesting about this implication at the end of the season is that now it's about his family. Now the pond has affected his childhood, how he grew up.
Yeah.
And I think that will be a really interesting launching pad for him into a season 4 of now. Like, I mean, it's the cheesiest line ever, but you see it, on those action movies. Now it's personal, and I do think that's kind of how he's going to approach things in a season.
To see that last scene where it's like him as the baby being dropped off with the Landrys and sort of being like, wait, his whole life is it even what we've thought, because is he, honestly, it made me think, is he even really an Augustine?
I promise he's not a Landry.
With a lot of the Alice in Wonderland kind of themes and, finding this clock, he, feels like he's the white rabbit, keeping the time. And now we actually got the clock to
Yep.
give him. So I'm
Mhm.
excited to see where that all goes.
We will say that, the literary references will not stop,
Yeah.
in a season 4. That's what we love. And Alice in Wonderland as a foundation and a basis is always going to be there. It's informed so much of our story, and it's always in the back of our heads. But, every season will introduce literature and poetry and even movies from other eras, and I'm this one will be no different. And it's actually one of the biggest thrills is, we'll drop a reference to a poem or a film in one of our episodes, and then you see online that people read it or watch it, and it's great because it's kind of a bit of a reveal into our own brains. It's all the stuff that we love. And this year we referenced Ghost and Mrs. Muir, and so many people watched it, which is like, that's a movie that I grew up
Fabulous.
on with mom. Like, mom, we rented it at the cottage and we just
Yeah.
keep watching it. So it's fun. It's fun to share a bit of our own library.
I like
Exactly.
wait every week to see your posts about like all the different
Oh,
references that you guys have
thank
put in.
you.
It's so
I'm
cool.
so behind. I'm so behind. They take a while to do, and I've had no time.
You've been a little busy.
But no,
Yeah.
7 and 8 are coming, I promise.
Speaking of Elliot, I gotta ask about, the love triangle with Elliot, Kat, and Thomas. I mean, like I said, I love the way that these kind of stories ripple. We had the love triangle with Evelyn and Dell and Colton, and now with them, and then with Max and Noah and Alice. So what can you tell us?
No one has ever really gone on this show, regardless of whether they're actually there or whether they're imagined, or or the memory of them. I mean, I think our show is always about how the echoes of the past play out in the present, um, and just the cyclical nature of things, and having that kind of perspective as a result of being able to time travel and seeing the patterns, seeing the generational things that get passed down, whether it's trauma uh, or just patterns in people's personalities and how people interact with one another. So no, I think no one has ever truly gone. I think what was really lovely though, and Mum wrote episode 9, so you can speak to it more than I can. The idea that there needed to be a bit of a moment of reckoning between Kat and Thomas, and in a moment of acknowledging the impossibility of their love, was important, because Kat is someone who leads with her heart and is impulsive, and that catches up with you. And if you really take a step back and look at their relationship, it's been this heightened, passionate thing of brief moments of peril and intensity. And how long can you sustain that, really? But yeah, Mum, you continue.
Every once in a while, even Kat has to face reality in the present, and not in the past. And I think they had to have that, they've tried to have that conversation before, but I think the fire was the catalyst to really realize how impossible this situation is, and how if she was in trouble in the present day, he could never get to her, and vice versa. And they would never, the worst part is if she had disappeared, if she'd been killed in that fire and Jacob had been wounded or unable to get home,
Yeah.
no one would know in the present what would happen, what had happened. Like, it would just be there stranded with no answers. And thinking about that to people you love, not knowing is unthinkable,
Yeah.
especially when you can avoid it. So I think they both came to that conclusion, Thomas included, that if he can't get to her and she can't get to him, there's no future. And I know a lot of the fans hated it, but it had to be done. But as Alex says, no one has ever really gone from the season, from the show, because their memories or their figments or their everything else,
Anything.
anything they
There's
can
always
be.
another trip in the pond too.
Something else I wanted to ask about was Delle's secret letters that she's been getting. Um, you know, that's something we haven't necessarily gotten the answer to yet. A lot of people are also very suspicious of Sam. So I'd love to hear about those mysteries still that we have to uncover.
It is absolutely something that's going to be explored.
Yeah,
We'll,
something
we'll
to
never
look
leave
forward
you hanging for too
to.
long. And the Sam of it all is, I think, is just, yeah, that's I'm so glad we're finally kind of exposing a little bit more about that in the end of our finale. There's a very purposeful reason for why we mimicked his pose and what he says with what Elliot tells Kat at the end of episode 1 of our pilot episode. If you notice, if you go back to episode 1, the way he's standing, the way we reveal Sam at the end, looking out at the pond, shooting him from behind, we did that with Elliot. And he actually ended up saying the exact same word to
Yeah,
Kat as Sam does to Dell on the phone about, for Kat, it was, "Where the heck is my daughter? I don't know where she is." And Elliot saying, "She'll be fine." "How do you know that, El?" "Well, I just do." Um, Very similar pattern. Again, patterns and history repeating itself
and
with Sam
cycles.
and Dell about Jacob and the reveal of him at the pond. So I think that in and of itself should tell people something about Sam. But again, those are the things that we know we need to address, and we will, and all in good time. Oh.
Oh, that's such a cool Easter egg too to hear. I'm curious, because things are so cyclical and things repeat, and is there anything that maybe has been revealed, or that, little Easter eggs that you're like, I can't believe people haven't seen that yet or haven't noticed that yet? I know they pick up everything. Is there anything you're like, I'm surprised people haven't found that one?
That's a really good question.
I think they find just about everything and more.
No,
Really,
there was one this season, and now oh shoot, I've forgotten it. But there was one early on where I was like, wow, they didn't pick up on that, and now I'm completely blanking. Darn.
it's rare. It's
Yeah,
really
it is very rare. It's very.
And sometimes when their theories we kind of go, where did that come from? But then but then they can also be bang on.
I'm so glad that they picked up
Amazing.
on Colton's first fall into the pond was an echo of Alice's first fall into the pond,
Yeah.
right down to the score that we used for the moment.
Yeah.
I'm also so glad that now that people have heard most of Breathe, the song that Alice and Colton sing together, that they've now gone back and noticed that a lot of the Del Colton moments in the 70s of coming together, first kiss, first dance, and that song is playing in the score.
Yeah.
Our beautiful composer Keith Power, who wrote Breathe with Alan Doyle, ended up incorporating the song into those moments of score, and I'm so glad people are noticing that.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
The other one that I think I was really proud of that people did notice was that Evelyn's, like, the tarot cards that she's doing by the water as they wait for Del and Colton to come back from their date actually is her future. Like, if you actually looked at the way that the cards are laid out and the pattern and looked it up, that is Evelyn's future. She just didn't notice it.
Oh, I love these details.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for you guys for season 4, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Yeah, no pressure. It's so lovely to see you, and
Yeah.
you really are part of our family too. And I'm just so grateful for everything that you do for the show from your end and the support. Like,
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
Of course, you guys really like have put together such a beautiful show that brings people together in so many ways. Families, people online coming together with theories, and it's just so awesome to see. Consider subscribing if you like this video and get even more entertainment news at popcultureplanet.net. See ya!